So this is mostly a random list that I decided to make on the fly, although I can't say that I can recommend the entire tournament from top to bottom. I will say that these 6 matches were worth the watch from my point of view, even if some of the shows that these matches took place on were less than favorable. Number 6. So for all the high praise that Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa got in their Lights Out match earlier this year, and even for as great as it was, her match against Nyla Rose in the AEW Women's Championship Eliminator tournament has it beat for me. It was the first time that I saw Britt as a professional wrestler and not as an amateur, and it was one of the first times that I saw Nyla Rose as the beast that they try to market her as. All around, this match blew away any expectations that I had going in, and they convinced me that the right person won in the end, even though I know that a lot of fans were expecting Britt to go over Nyla. Number 5. So the Japanese bracket in this tournament was the one that revved up the engine for the entire tournament, delivering great matches one after another, and then surprisingly enough, delivering matches like these. I remember when I couldn't stand watching Emi Sakura in AEW. I really wasn't a fan of her Freddie Mercury gimmick, and I thought her matches were subpar at best. And really, it was through this tournament that I finally got it with her. Her match against Veni in the first round was the one that made me buy into her as a wrestler, and her match here against Yuka Sakazaki was the one that showed me a completely different side of her character, with her using her students as a tool to get an advantage over Yuka, and her being as vicious as she was in her heelish attitude, which was a side of her that I didn't even think that she had in her in the first place. Yuka was the perfect babyface wrestler to fight off and overcome Emi's unfair onslaught from her and her students, and made Emi out to be a real threat. And likewise, Emi made Yuka out to be a total babyface, when I'll admit, I didn't see the appeal to Yuka Sakazaki in AEW either. For all of AEW's failures when it comes to how they managed their women's division, this tournament did everything right and effectively course-corrected their women's division, at least for a short period of time. Number 4. Okay, so no, this wasn't a tournament match per se, but it did take place on their tournament shows, and was a totally kick-ass match, so I'm counting it anyways. Prior to this match, I just didn't see the appeal in Hikaru Shida as a wrestler. Whenever she would compete on AEW, to the tune of thousands of fans worldwide praising her work against the likes of Abaddon and placing her above wrestlers like Io Shirai of all people, I just found it difficult to take her seriously. Through this match and this match alone, I finally got it with her. AEW's women's division is an embarrassment, and it's an embarrassment because of how badly they failed in getting their women's wrestlers over, and more specifically the Joshi wrestlers that they constantly bring in and just assume that a mainstream American audience would know who these women were, leading to a lot of awkward matches where AEW crowds, a bunch of people that so desperately want to like every single little thing that's in front of them, have no fucking clue how to react other than to throw a few half-hearted oohs and ahs. It's the same shit with Ring of Honor's women's division and how badly they mishandled that shit back when the Women of Honor era was running rampant over Ring of Honor. At least back then, there wasn't a legion of wrestling fans that were forcing themselves to like Kelly Klein and pretend that she was anything more than mediocre in the ring. And with all that being said, after having finally got that off my chest, I think one of the biggest reasons why this match in particular got so over with me was because everyone involved seemed to be in their element. There wasn't any crowd there to suck the life out of the match with them being forced to appease a bunch of people that haven't the slightest clue what they're like or who they are and how they wrestle. All they had was themselves, the warehouse, and the cameras. And all that they had to do is what they knew, and do it well. And through that, Hikaru Shida came off as a much bigger star in a fucking warehouse than she ever did in front of an AEW crowd. She was right where she belonged in a sense. Emi Sakura, Veni, and Rin Katakura were all in their element as well. Maki Ito was in full character mode in this match, and Mei Suruga, someone that I've praised a whole lot already on this channel, was every bit the chaotic ball of energy that she ever was. This match was hands down one of the best in the history of AEW's women's division, and was more than worth the watch just for how fucking fun it was. Number 3. Aja Kong made Ryu Mizunami look like something. Through this match, Ryo came off like a big star, at least as far as Joshi wrestlers go, and got one over on Aja Kong in exciting fashion, with her hitting her patented leg drop onto Aja to the outside of the ring and winning via countout, a win that in wrestling typically doesn't mean shit, but did so much here to make Aja come across as an obstacle. It's pretty fucking cool that in 2021, Aja Kong is capable to pull off this high quality of a match after all the shit that she's already done in wrestling. Number 2. Spoilers. So the rest of this list is just going to be Ryo Mizunami matches. And I gotta say, even though her match against Hikaru Shida left far more to be desired than it should have, this tournament did a hell of a job of getting her over with me along the way. Her match against Nyla Rose here in the finals was everything that it should have been, right up until the end and after the match when Shida and Ryo had their face-off. This tournament did a hell of a job of getting Nyla Rose over with me as well, when before I didn't see anything else other than a Nia Jax knockoff, and these days I finally have a reason to look forward to her matches, even though she can still be clumsy at times. This was probably the best match in Nyla Rose's career so far, and close to being the best for Ryo as well, at least in AEW. Number 1. And for the last match on the list, we have Yuka Sakazaki versus Ryo Mizunami in the Japanese bracket final, in a match that felt every bit as earned as it could have been up to that point. It really is shitty how I just can't recommend watching the entire tournament, given how some of the matches were so awkwardly spread out across episodes of Dynamite, and some shows just flat out being so bad that the entire tournament wound up being a dud overall. But at least matches on the tournament like these were worth the watch, even if the tournament overall just wasn't enough. After having already watched most of the tournament and being sold from the very first show, Yuka versus Ryo was riding on a high and capitalized on that high perfectly. So yeah, those were my 6 matches from the AEW Women's Championship Eliminator Tournament that I felt the need to make a list out of. I'm not sure whether or not AEW is going to put on another one of these in the future, but if they do, they might have some big shoes to fill if they're ever going to top these 6 matches from the first one.